What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here. Don't forget, you can check us out online on social media at Rich Q and Q, on IG at Rich Q and Q. YouTube channel up and running, a lot of engagement, a lot of content, a lot of live shows. We just hit one earlier today regarding if the NFL is rigged and or fixed. We'll get into that in a couple minutes on this Tuesday with our good friend, our NFL insider, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us on the Tuesday edition of BYP. Lloyd, I see you got that ugly backdrop behind you. How are you?
Yeah, it's Lincoln Financial Field, and doing well. Here in Philadelphia, as you were talking about earlier, we're hearing from all the Eagles folks, and they're their chests pumped out. Obviously, it's exciting that the Eagles are in the Super Bowl, but there is still one more game to be played. So, lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can take a step back and you look at the game against the 49ers. I thought if they were fully healthy and engaged, the 49ers could have went on the road and beat the Philadelphia Eagles. It turns out as the week progressed and we got closer to the game, I don't want to say I wavered or I flip-flop. I just really did not like the matchups in the trenches for the 49ers. And some of the blown calls, some of the questionable calls, the non-reviewable, like the Smith no catch aside, the Philadelphia Eagles just waxed them in the trenches, right? So we can sit there and say they didn't have a quarterback. They had to go to Johnson. They were a banged up team. Great teams do that. They put you away early, right? And they don't apologize for doing it. And that's exactly what the Philadelphia Eagles did. Big time win in the NFC Championship. They go to Arizona, and they were just a better team.
Yeah, Q, they outclassed them. And it was a tough watch for somebody like you and I that analyzes the game. And there really wasn't a lot to analyze there. Nope. They knocked Purdy out of the game, and then it was over, basically. And you had to put this on the offensive line for the Niners, as you were saying. They tried to have a backup tight end block Hassan Reddick on that key play. Yep. And then he gets in, hits the elbow, and we know the rest from there with the fumble, and then the Eagles were just rolling. So the Eagles are a dominant team. We talked about all season. What they want to do is get that big lead, run the football, kill the clock, and then defensively they want to get after teams, put the pressure on them, and then get turnovers. So that's exactly what they did, and you got to tip your cap to them.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to any theory of, it's a week. Listen, I don't care. If my road to the Super Bowl or the playoffs is easy because of who I played, am I really going to apologize for that? Does it lessen how good of a team I am? No, it doesn't. I mean, think about this. They can run the football. They have their choice. Pick your poison with those running backs. They got a very good tight end in Goddard. They got monster wide receivers in Smith and Brown. You have an MVP caliber quarterback in Jalen Hurts that everyone said this kid could not play the position. All the high paid talking heads came on the air and they shouted on the rooftop. They shouted at the top of the mountain where it was a bad draft pick. This kid can't play, sit on bench. He's not going to be a franchise quarterback. And what did he do? He basically sold out. He went out there and he shut all the analysts up. So for me to sit here on a Tuesday and sit there and say, well, they're not deserving of going to the Super Bowl or winning, it's absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, I know what tough runs are in the playoffs. I've experienced it as a Giant fan. I've seen tough runs. I've seen this Eagles team go on a run, by the way, with a backup quarterback in Nick Foles. So this narrative where, well, who the hell did you beat? I don't want to hear that crap anymore. Because they punched the Giants in the gut early and then they knocked them out early. And they did the same exact thing to San Francisco. And this is a team, and I'll say it again. I'll bang the drum. When you panic against the Eagles and you get punched in the gut and you panic and you don't have a plan B, that's it. It's lights out. They're going to win the game. They're going to rout you. They're going to dominate you. And at first gloss and first glance, looking at the Super Bowl matchup with Kansas City, it reeks of what Tampa Bay did to Kansas City a couple of years ago when they absolutely dominated in the trenches in the line of scrimmage.
Well, a couple of years ago that happened to Kansas City in the Super Bowl, and then they went about retooling that offensive line. So now they have Creed Humphrey there at center, a kid that they drafted. They got Orlando Brown coming in, but Thuney coming over from the Patriots. So they made some changes up front, but it's going to be interesting. Can they slow down that Eagles pass rush? We know the Eagles We're, I think, second in NFL in terms of sacks, and
Yep.
they have 4 guys that had 10 plus, and you saw what a game wrecker Hassan Reddick was. You know, it's 3 tackles, 2 sacks. He had the forced fumble I talked about earlier, and you know, he's just bringing pressure from all over the place. And then you forget about Nottingham Sue, and next thing you know, he's busting up the middle, and he's knocking Josh Johnson out the game and lifted him up off the ground, and unfortunately, he gets a concussion. So this defensive line is mean. It's nasty. If you know, we'll go into X and O's on the game, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. But I really think if the Chiefs are going to attack them, it's going to be Pat Mahomes going to Kelsey and picking on those linebackers and the safeties. But you know, it was a total team effort, as you were saying. Just dominate the Niners, and the Niners had a lot of talk coming into the game, but the Eagles shut them up early, and then they beat them up. So it was a good win for them.
Yeah, I mean, Reddick, I wanted the Giants to go after him. I mean, he's a Jersey kid. He's a Camden guy. Went to high school at Haddon Heights, obviously played at Temple. You know, I know what he's doing in the playoffs and towards the end of the season, and it's unfortunate. It kind of gets lost in the sauce when we think of, you know, the great defensive players, but you can put his name. I mean, if we're going to say the Donalds of the world or the Boses of the world or the Parsons of the world are game wreckers, I got news flash for people that haven't watched Hassan Reddick. He's a friggin' game wrecker. I mean, it's just, he is playing above and beyond. He's playing at such an elite level right now, and the caliber of talent is there. So when you watch him play, you now have to start to scheme. You have to game plan. And oh, by the way, we didn't even get to the other players that you mentioned or we've highlighted or documented throughout the NFL season. That's what makes this team so dangerous on both sides of the football. And like I said, I say it tongue in cheek. It pains me to say it, but the film doesn't lie. I mean, that's how good they are on the offensive side of the football. On the defensive side of the football, they can run the ball. I think they're going to push Kansas City in that regard as well. You know, Mahomes is still a little bit compromised with that ankle injury. We've got 2 weeks to dissect it. I want to get to the AFC Championship with you for a moment. Again, Lloyd Vance, our NFL Insider, jumping on a Tuesday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. You look at that game, and everyone's blaming the young player, Osai. Yeah, Osai for the roughing the penalty, the flag late in the game. And again, take a step back. It's a bang play. The kid had a hell of a season. He's played well. He played well in that game. He'll learn from the mistakes. Did he cost Cincinnati that game? No, he did not. Cincinnati had 2 opportunities with under 6 minutes to go to win that game or to take the lead. They couldn't get it done. Special teams, you punt the ball down the middle of the field. That's a freaking no-no. I mean, really, it's a no-no. And they had some gaffes, and Burrow had the tip pick. So I don't want to hear this stuff that kid cost the game. It's just, you cannot give Kansas City, you can't have those little mishaps against a team like Kansas City is what I'm trying to say. Like, you give them an opening for a body shot or a counter, and they're going to take it and they're going to connect.
Yeah, Q. And we talked about going into this game, Joe Burrow was 3-0 versus the Chiefs, and he just had not been making those mistakes. And you talk about leaving an opening and putting it in boxing terms. You know, he left the chance for a counter punch or a big punch coming back from Mahomes and the Chiefs. And you know, defensively, they got after the Bengals. We talked about that offensive line with the Bengals having 3 replacements out there. And finally, Frank Clark had 1.5 sacks. Chris Jones, you talk about game record on the AFC side. That's what he did. He had 2 sacks in the game, 4 tackles, and he just seemed to be everywhere. He had revenge in his eyes. So, you know, it was a good game, solid game. And I agree with you that you can't put the whole loss on that kid. Yes, it was a very bad mistake. And then you felt bad for him when his teammate Pratt was yelling at him going in the locker room. But it's just part of the story of the game. It's not the whole story. I think overall, when I was crunching the stats, you know, these 2 teams were very evenly matched. And, you know, those turnovers were just the key in this game for Kansas City to win it. And then Pat Mahomes spreading the ball around to a number of different people, including Kelsey.
Yeah, I don't need to see the teammate coming out and saying, "Oh, this is my last year. Would you effing touch him for?" And then you have BJ Hill basically protecting the kid like a mama bear does, and good for him for doing that. But the other stuff, I don't need to see any of that stuff, because again, I understand you need to take in consideration the gravity of the moment, right? Down, distance, situational football. You knew once you laid a paw on Mahomes on the road in Kansas City in an AFC championship game, they were throwing the flag. I mean, it's just by rule, but I can go back and say, what about the PI on Hilton? What about the miss roughing the passer call on Burrow? You know, what about the mulligan on the third down? I want to get into officiating because I feel as though we talk about it every single solitary year for the past 10 plus 15 years or so that we've been doing this. And I don't get it. Like, explain to me, like I'm a child, the San Francisco game, Smith's non-catch, right? Now, if you're San Francisco, when you see the player start to say, hurry up, everyone knows that's code for I didn't frigging catch it. I dropped it. Get to the line, get the playoff. Someone from San Francisco has got to convey that quickly, whether it's a player to Shanahan, throw the flag. You can't leave anything to chance, so you have to challenge it. But what about the expedited replay? What's the point of that process when it wasn't even utilized in that moment?
Yeah, Q, I agree with you. All season, I'd seen games and plays stopped by the officials say, we're going to take it's been initiated by New York or whomever, by the league. And all of a sudden, they didn't even initiate it. Oh, they want to blame it on Fox. They didn't have the right angle to look at, et cetera. But, it should have been looked at. But also, as you're saying, the Niners should have forced the hand. Yep. and also looked at it. That was very key play. And then also in terms of Niners, what do you have to lose? It's so early in the game. Okay, you're going to lose a timeout. Why not do that? But I also agree with you. Overall, I think the officiating has just been, spotty. I'll just put it that way. And they've left themselves open for a lot of exposure in terms of, phantom whistles and some of these calls that they've missed.
And that play, if it's, let's just say for a moment, it's not a touchdown, right? So obviously it's extremely early in the game. The next series, San Francisco fumbled, the Eagles punted, San Francisco punted. And then it was another punt by the Eagles. San Francisco tied it up on the Christian McCaffrey run, a bad tackling by the Eagles. And then it's a 14-7 game. So if you don't get that, and the next series, who's to say they're not calling the game differently if you're the 49ers and offense? So everything always has a cause and effect and a trickle down effect. And unfortunately, it didn't go San Francisco's way. I still think they're a very good team. I don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback now with Purdy. You have Lance on the roster. They're going to try to trade Jimmy G. That's a conversation for the offseason. But to your point with the officials and the referee, now everyone's coming out of the woodwork and saying the NFL is fixed. The NFL is rigged. Here you go. My counter to that is, like, what's the benefit? I'm hearing former players say, well, it's scripted. It's not scripted. This isn't wrestling. It's not scripted. It's not scripted for Hostetler to take over for Sims and go on the road and beat the Niners, then beat Buffalo. It's not scripted for Nick Foles to come in for Carson Wentz. It's not scripted for a football to get stuck, to David Tyree's head. It's not scripted. Like, this notion that the NFL is fixed and the NFL is rigged is just friggin' asinine. It's just so stupid. It's asinine. It's more or less from the people that are losing betting on these games because it didn't go their way.
Correct. And you and I know this is sour grapes, and more than likely it's people that are calling radio stations because they lost their bet or it always seems to be their team didn't win, so they're going to vent and they're just not happy about it. But I agree with you. There are some crazy things that happen in the NFL, but it's not scripted. It's these officials, they do need to get better at their job. They do some crazy things that make you scratch your head, but by no means is it fixed, and it does drive you crazy when you hear
that. Do you think they're afraid to slow the game down? Like, and the reason I bring it up is, why wouldn't they just challenge? If there's really plays or calls in question, then maybe you should make everything reviewable. Like, how many times were you watching the game? So my buddy's a 49ers fan, and he was just going off every time the Eagles snapped the football that Lane Johnson was offsides. From us watching on TV, it looked like he jumped every single solitary play, right? But I saw OC Umenyiora tweet out, it's not offsides. Trust me, I know. From a defensive standpoint, you know the count, right? You jump, the snap, and then you jump. So you time it perfectly. But we're watching it as fans, And it is egregious. Like, it's like, oh my God, he's moving a full step, or the play clock going down. But since they're at home, you get the millimeter second. You know, how
Yeah,
many
it's
times do you listen to the broadcasters on third down, incomplete, ... and there's no flag? I mean, this is where we're at right now. So how do you remedy this? How do you fix this?
yeah.
Do you start to grade the officials and really penalize them and dock them games, dock them pay? Do you get the most consistent group? And then you say, look, you can do the playoffs, or you get the most consistent individuals. Okay, now you can do the Super Bowl. But if you do that, they don't have games under their belt to be in sync with each other. So I don't know how you fix this.
Yeah, that's, $1 billion question, but I think the NFL, their competition committee, and the referees all have to kind of figure this thing out, because you're right, Q. You don't want anybody questioning the integrity of the game, and or can they improve these officials, or these officials on the take? They just got to do a better job. I've always said these guys should be full-time, and that's all they should work on, is officiating and watching plays and watching tape and making sure they get it right. And also, I think the eye in the sky should really be there a lot more than it is. Maybe allow more challenges, or more reviews of things, because you just see too often they say, oh, he's out of challenges. You see something that can't be turned around.
All right, let's get into some of the other big news. So Sean Payton back on the sidelines right now with Denver. Obviously, we know the compensation. I mean, it's pretty much the cupboard's bare now if you're a Denver Broncos fan. I am not the biggest Sean Payton fan. I think he's kind of overrated. I kind of put him in that category of John Gruden. I also think maybe a little product of those great Saints teams. They had a lot of debacles and a lot of bad playoff losses. I mean, does this kind of wash away the bad taste of Hackett and the type of season that Russell Wilson had?
They're going with the big name, and they want to make the big splash. The Walton family that's owning the team now. They bought it from the Bolins, and they wanted their guy, and obviously Hackett was not their guy, and they made the GM Payton made a big decision in hiring him. I was surprised Payton actually, the other George Payton, survived that hiring, but we'll see how that goes. But Sean Payton's coming in, and I'm sure they're going to give him the keys to the kingdom, and this is his team. So, I think a lot of these Super Bowl winning guys, after they win a Super Bowl, like Mike McCarthy and some of these other guys, they're living on that Super Bowl for a long time. So we'll see if Sean Payton's able to turn this around. Obviously, he did some good things in New Orleans, but too often there was a cycle there where that team was winning, 6 games, 8 games, and they just couldn't get over the hump. And Drew Brees covered up a lot of mistakes there.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. It's a fair point. They had the 3 or 4 window, playoffs, win the Super Bowl, then kind of the mediocrity, 7 and 9s, and then boom, a couple 13 and 3s mixed in there. And maybe he was a product of having a guy like Drew Brees under center. How about D'Amico Ryans? And I know it was, again, you had a Rappaport and Scheffner, having a pissing contest on the details, or, if maybe it was a plan B, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, I like Ryans. I think he's a very good coordinator. And I said something earlier today on BYP where I don't know, when you look at the Texans and how bad that organization has been, and the, just the culture and how they handle their coaches over the last 2 years, and letting them both go, including last year with Lovie Smith, and now hiring a third straight head coach, a third African-American head coach. I feel as though, and you tell me if I'm off base, or if maybe I'm not wording it properly, it was to maybe appease the masses, because my concern was, what happens if D'Amico Ryan struggles this year or next year? I mean, it's a 6-year deal. You got to give him at least 4 years to get his feet wet, to rebuild this. What are they going to fire him? Like, I just don't like how they do business.
Yeah. And I think last year they kind of got caught with their pants down in terms of that hire in terms of Lovie Smith. You have the Brian Flores lawsuit come out, and they were looking at Josh McCown, quite frankly, a guy who didn't have not have any experience. And then they said, "Oh, the spotlight's on us. All right, hire Lovie Smith, and we'll see how it goes from there." But obviously, he got the same treatment as David Culley, the guy you were talking about before. So you get Culley, then you have Smith on a 1-year deal, and then and then they kind of regroup. So the McNairs that own the team there, they kind of got to figure out what's going on. But I think they're going in the right direction because D'Amico Ryans is coming with that Niners pedigree. He's a former Houston Texans guy that was a very good middle linebacker for them, a Pro Bowl type player, and they give him a 6-year deal. So hopefully he can use up that whole 6 years to rebuild this roster. And then they have a few pieces there, but they're going to have to go into the draft and look to get a new quarterback and then start from there. So a team that was rudderless, and hopefully this will be a good key hire, but you definitely have to watch it and say, okay, given their history, were those two other guys stopgaps, and is this really a change that they're making for the good?
Yeah, and memo to the TV networks, just because they hired Sean Payne, I don't need to see Denver 5 straight weeks. I don't. It's a horrible product, and I don't know, again, how you fix that offense and you fix Russell Wilson. The coverage bare, so there's going to be a challenge there. Lastly, before I let you get out of here, I know there's this buzz. Rodgers is going to be Rodgers. It's when Rodgers makes his announcement, he'll make it his announcement. After a while, it gets to Brett Favre-ish. Like, at this point, I don't give a crap whether he play or not. I don't care. I don't think he's going to New York. I think he either retires or stays with Green Bay. That's just my opinion. But what about Brady? So I know there were multiple reports that the Dolphins are not expected to pursue Brady. And I know there's some really tuned in Dolphins insiders and reporters down there in Florida, Miami, that are saying that report doesn't mean anything. I think Brady did buy a nice little 1-bedroom or a nice little studio apartment, somewhere in Miami. So I'm wondering, Tua still hasn't cleared concussion protocol. I don't know if they believe he is a long-term answer. They might say all the right things, but we're not privy to sitting inside that that organization, right? When the brass is talking and whatnot. I can see the Dolphins really making a witching hour pitch to Brady and saying, well, wait a second. You beat up on this division for years. Okay. You can now do it against New England. You can do it against the Jets, a team that you owned. And we think we can put the pieces together to compete with Buffalo, because now everyone thinks that the window has closed in Buffalo. So I guess the question is, can you see Miami making a run here at Brady?
I definitely could. Stephen Ross wanted him before. He didn't make any bones about it. And then they got in trouble for it, to tampering calls. So, it's a situation where Chris Greer's a general manager. He's going to make all the, say all the right things in terms of Tua and the team overall. But if they have the opportunity to get Brady, I think they will try to get into the mix there. I don't think Brady's going back to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That situation's kind of soured. I don't know if Leftwich was his guy, and Leftwich's not there anymore. Bruce Arians obviously isn't the coach, and Todd Bowles is very conservative. He does not like to throw the football as much as Brady does. So I think Brady's going to look at a variety of landing spots, and maybe like that old Reggie White tour where he's going all around the league to see which landing spot he's going to be. So, but he's going to be 46 years old, and you're going to have to factor in, and I know he will come with a good price, but he's going to want a line that's going to protect him. And he's going to basically be his own offensive coordinator, kind of like Peyton Manning was when he went to Denver Broncos. So going to be very interesting. I still think with Josh McCown's over in with the Raiders, I think that could be a key landing spot for them. So maybe Raiders, they're talking about maybe even the Niners. I'm hearing that out there, they trade Jimmy G, and then they kind of slide Brady in there.
I mentioned that. Yeah, I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. I just thought, because remember now, he grew up, he idolized Montana. He was a big time Niners fan, right? So, and the funny thing is that when it shocked me, because you have Lance, you have Purdy, you have Garoppolo, you've got a couple pieces to play with there. All right, I'm going to assume I know Lackey and game balls for AFC and NFC championship games, because you've kind of highlighted one player already. So let's start. Well, we'll save NFC. Let's go to the AFC, because I'm curious. I have a feeling I know where you went. And if you went that way, I might have an issue with it, but go ahead.
Game ball winner is Eagles pass rusher Hassan Reddick. I mean, he was just
Okay, and
dominant.
that's fair.
I mean, he was just, 3 tackles we talked about. He had the 2 sacks and the key play of the game, the forced fumble. And I just can't believe they still try to have a backup tight end block him in that key situation. And as you were saying, it's good that he's getting some press. He obviously was not in the defensive player of the year conversation, but he played even better than Nick Bosa in this game. So he gets my game ball.
This is where I think I might have a problem. AFC. I hope you have a little decorum, but we shall see. These are your game balls. These are your lackeys. Go ahead. Who do you got?
For the lackey?
Yeah.
Joseph Asai, the linebacker from the Banks. I know I shouldn't pick on a kid. It's an easy, trample on him. I probably should have gave it to Joe Burrow. He was not Joe Cole in this game. He had 2 interceptions, but that play was just so big. And you feel bad for the kid in that spot. As I talked about, Pratt was yelling at him, and social media has just been blowing up and everybody's trying to step on him. But I think he'll overcome it and use this as a learning tool. But unfortunately, I gave it to Asai as my lackey for the week.
Listen, they're your awards. You have every right to dish them out as you seem fit. He is Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider. Give him a follow on Twitter at Lloyd Vance, NFL writer, historian, and researcher as well. PFWA award winner, and we've seen him in the past, ESPN and NFL Network contributor. All right, my friend. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe next week we can fix the that's
I'll try to get another background, maybe a more neutral one, given that we got the big game coming up and you don't want to favor one team over the other.
There you go. He says,
even though all my Eagles cousins, that's all they're doing is calling me and all that. I've been watching the news, making sure they're not climbing any light posts. A lot of crazy Eagle fans.
Yeah, see, and you promote it like radio, right? The big game, just in case no trademark infringement. So, all right, pal. Always appreciate you jumping on a Tuesday edition of BYP. We'll talk next week.
All right, thanks for having me on.
You got it.